Hello.
Shalom, Rabbi Papi.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I had moved my computer and had to.
Shalom, Maddie.
Shalom.
Carol.
Hey,
Shalom,
Susie.
Hi.
That's a treat.
Yeah, we got just about everybody today. So that's really wonderful.
Oh, Ricky is going to be, if she can get here at all, she'll be late.
Okay.
Hi, Shal.
Thank you.
Everyone. So Harayim Tovim.
Hi, Rabbi.
Yep.
I was calling you today in one of my chavrutot. That whole thing about the young soldiers, remember we had a whole correspondence about that?
Okay. There we go. Let me one more time work on the view. Oh, we're already there. Good. So we move on to the, pretty much the last of the special parshiot that precede Pesach. This is the Haftarah that is always read on the Shabbat preceding Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Who has got their phone on? I'm getting an echo.
I have my phone, but it's
That shouldn't just do it. Okay, the echo's gone. Okay, good. Sorry. So again, we're on the last of our special parshiot, of the Arba parshiot, the four special parshiot preceding Pesach. And as I mentioned, this one, Shabbat HaChodesh, is the Shabbat preceding Rosh Chodesh Nisan, the month of Pesach. Of course, for better or for worse, the Shabbat does not fall on Rosh Chodesh, or I should say, Rosh Chodesh does not fall on Shabbat HaChodesh. Otherwise, we'd have once again 3 Sifrei Torah. So the Shabbat, we only have 2. The regular parasha and this special parasha for Shabbat HaChodesh. The Maftir reading from the Torah is the instructions for Pesach Mitzrayim, the first Pesach in Egypt. Very appropriate because we're approaching Pesach. And the Haftarah will also deal with the topic of Pesach, but that's not its focus. The passage comes from the writings of Yechezkel, the prophet Ezekiel, and it's part of a special section that comes toward the end of his book, even though he's already started giving prophecies of consolation and return. This is part of a series of prophecies that begin in chapter 40, in which he envisions, or he's given a vision, I should say, of the rebuilt temple. Certainly in our day, this is seen as a messianic prophecy. In Yechezkel's time, it was not messianic. It was the Israelites were going to return to their land. The temple would be rebuilt. But as that second temple was rebuilt and then subsequently destroyed, his vision became that of the future temple. And just to get a sense of what's happening, because it's
even at the time of our copy.
Pardon me?
Even at the very time that this prophecy was, say, 572, it was messianic to some extent. Why? Yeah. Number one, we know for a fact that when they did rebuild the temple, the way Yechezkel envisions it, and the rituals that Yechezkel thinks are going to be done in it, nobody paid the slightest attention to either one. Secondly, when Chagai, it becomes apparent that Chagai and Zechariah have to do a great deal of pushing, because the Israelites themselves don't seem too enthusiastic about putting up another temple. They probably felt that, the Hashem showed his disfavor with it. And had it not been for Chagai and Zechariah, it's pretty clear that the Israelites would not have put up another temple, and I'm not even talking about external opposition now. I'm talking about internal opposition. Okay, so in fact, in other words, it seems to me that Yechezkel, even in his own time, is to a large extent the voice in the wilderness.
Certainly, very possible. And certainly, this whole section, beginning in chapter 40, is presented in a much more dramatic fashion than simply, by the way, here are the rules and regulations. So let's just take a look at the beginning, just the very beginning of chapter 40, and see what he makes reference to. Who would like to read?
I'll read.
Okay, thank you, Maddie.
Go ahead, Maddie.
In the 25th year of our exile, the 14th year after the city had fallen, at the beginning of the year, the 10th day of the month, on that very day, the hand of Hashem came upon me, and he brought me there. He brought me in visions of God to the land of Israel, and he set me down on a very high mountain on which there seemed to be the outline of a city on the south. He brought me over to it, and there, standing at the gate, was a man who shone like copper. In his hand were a cord of linen and a measuring rod. The man spoke to me, "Mortal, look closely and listen attentively and note well everything I am going to show you. For you have been brought here in order to be shown, and report everything you see to the house of Israel."
Okay, so what are some of the remarkable elements of this introduction?
Well, first of all, the traveling and the vision of this angelic being shining like copper.
Right. So this is, very much he really he's almost making reference to his original vision of God's chariot, but visions of God, and he's being brought to the land of Israel, which of course he was in his visions earlier on in the book. And again, an angelic being, very bright and shiny, copper, not necessarily quite the vision of the throne of God with the kruvim, or I should say, with the angels around it, but it's still pretty remarkable, still the images of light. So this whole vision is being presented in a deeply spiritual way.
I don't see the light, and that wasn't meant as a pun. In other words, the translation says "shone like copper," but that's not what the text says. The text just says the man basically had a color of copper. Would be like you'd call Trump the Orange Man. In other words, it certainly doesn't say
Lahavdil elef havdalot.
right. But I'm just looking. We're not in Lakewood right now.
Yeah.
Basically, where I'm saying at the moment is if you actually do what the text says, there's nothing here that gives you an impression of any special light or anything else. That's the translator's trying to put that in. It's not there.
Yeah, except that Nechoshet, for them, generally had a shine to it. And it's used in so many contexts, particularly in Yechezkel, but certainly elsewhere, where Nechoshet is deliberately something that is shiny. And when he presents it, Vihine ish, here is a man, mar'ehu, his vision, mar'e Nechoshet, like the vision of copper. You're right, the translation is not good.
It's not vision, it's appearance.
What about what it was said?
His appearance is like the appearance.
Appearance of Nechoshet.
You can't translate it as vision here. That's not what it means.
All of which should be understood as bronze, not copper. But anyway,
that's true too. So all I'm saying is this is not it's not correct to say we're talking light here. I said at the beginning, I fail to see the light.
Yeah. Is there any significance the way the Ezekiel's addressed, like mortal? I mean, I don't know if angels would generally do that and say that.
Well, that's how Yechezkel is generally addressed.
Ah, okay. Thank you.
We generally translate it as Ben Adam, but it's in fact Vaidaber Elai Haish, and the man spoke to me, Ben Adam. See with your eyes, Ben Adam. translated son of man, but it simply means mortal.
Okay.
Okay.
Or human might be better,
Yeah, human.
because after all, animals are also mortal. So
Right.
human, I think, is better translation.
Is this city Jerusalem, the city?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's Jerusalem. And as part of the vision, and again, why I think that, there are a lot of references to light here is certainly when we come to Kavod Hashem. And this is also significant, again, not in our Haftarah, but this is going ahead a little bit in chapter 43. Maddie, continue.
Then he led me to a gate, the gate that faced east. And there, coming from the east, with a roar like the roar of mighty waters, was the presence of the God of Israel. And the earth was lit up by his presence. The vision was like the vision I had seen when I came to destroy the city, the very same vision that I had seen by the Chebar Canal.
Yep.
Forthwith, I fell on my face. The presence of the Lord entered the temple by the gate that faced eastward. A spirit carried me into the inner court, and lo, the presence of the Lord filled the temple, and I heard speech addressed to me from the temple, though the man was standing beside me.
Yeah. So I think that this makes very clear the similarity to his initial vision and the drama that represented. And that's part of his vision. And here it's definitely light because it says, "Va'aretz he'ira mikvodo." The earth, the land was illuminated from his glory. And the glory of God often, very often associated with cloud, but also associated with fire. Now, so as we said, we've got this whole dramatic introduction to this section, to this vision of a restored temple and what will take place in it. But as Yehudi mentioned, not everyone paid that much attention to it. And frankly, there may have been reasons why they didn't pay attention to it. So here we have a well-known story in the Bavli. Keep going. This is from the Talmud.
Rav Yehuda said, "Indeed, that man is remembered for good, and Hananiah ben Hizkiah was his name. Were it not for him, the book of Ezekiel would have been suppressed. Its words contradicted the words of Torah."
Yeah, so there was a problem with Sefer Yechezkel in that many of the rules and regulations that Ezekiel lays out, in fact, were different than what we have in the Torah. And in fact, you can read what Rashi explains, that they could have suppressed the book of Ezekiel. Go ahead here, Rashi.
Because at the end of the book, there are words regarding the offerings that contradict the words of the Torah.
And we'll see that in our Haftarah in a moment. So just finishing up the story in the Talmud.
What did he do? They brought up to him 300 barrels of oil, and he sat in an upper chamber and expounded it to reconcile its teachings with those of the Torah.
Okay, they brought him up the oil for light, so he can see. Now, this is really wonderful. Thank you very much to Hananiah ben Chizkiah. The only problem is we do not have those teachings.
We don't have it because nobody really cares about them, and this legend is just a cover to basically, make it sound like somebody did care. But as a practical matter, just take a look and see what we actually have. If there's a contradiction between a law written in one part of the Torah to a law written in another part of the Torah, somewhere along the line, either the Mechilta, the Sifra, or the Sifrei are going to, spend pages and pages of explaining, what's going on with that contradiction and how to resolve it and this and that and the other thing. But if it's a contradiction between the Torah and Yechezkel, nobody gives a hoot. Well, it's like a contradiction between the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence. The president doesn't swear allegiance to the Declaration of Independence. The president swears allegiance to the Constitution. That's the law of the land. The declaration was simply a piece of propaganda designed to essentially, get support from various groups that, at that point, nobody knew if they were going to support the cause or not. But the point I'm really trying to make here is that, even the Mefarshim don't work very hard at reconciliation, and as you're right, there isn't a single quote from this Hananiah because this whole story is nothing more than a legend. Okay, the fact is they really couldn't care as far as they're concerned. Cheskel contradicts the Torah. That's his problem. If one part of the Torah contradicts another part of the Torah, that's our problem.
So then, Yehudi, why did they include this story in the Talmud?
I just told you, in order to cover the fact that they don't care. In other words, they put in the story that says, "Oh, don't. If it bothers you in any way, let me just tell you,
Okay.
we covered it somewhere. It's covered. Like just the other day, this whole bit with that. What was it called? Signal gate. If that bothers you, the administration will get up and say, "Oh, it wasn't anything near like what it looks like." It was instantly taken care of. Blah blah blah. In other words, they realized that there was a problem, but they simply basically didn't really put any serious effort into basically making a reconciliation. Had they done so, we would have something to tell us what, the content. That's just the point. On the other hand, they realize the lack of having something might cause people to wonder. So they say, "Oh, it's out there somewhere. Don't worry about it." That's called a cover story, Rabbi Papi.
Thank you. I appreciate that elucidation. So also, it should be mentioned that in terms of Jewish law, the law is seen as deriving from the Torah itself. We rarely, sometimes do, and in fact, they take some examples from Yechezkel, but generally, we do not see halacha as flowing from either Nevi'im or Ketuvim. The legal basis, the legal foundation is in the Torah. So that's probably another reason why, if there's differences, okay. So let's go on with the Haftarah. Would somebody like to continue? Now, but just before this, they're talking about contributions that people have to make to the temple, and they're picking up on that point. So I would like to continue.
In this contribution?
Yes.
In this contribution, the entire population must join with the prince in Israel. But the burnt offerings, the grain offerings, and the libations on festivals, new moons, Sabbaths, all fixed occasions of the house of Israel shall be the obligation of the prince. He shall provide the purgation offerings, the grain offerings, the burnt offerings, and the offerings of well-being to make expiation for the house of Israel.
Yeah, purgation, like purge. Basically, I'm not quite sure why they use this translation. It really is a purification offering. Chatat, as it says in the Hebrew, Hu ya'aseh et hachatat ve'et hamincha ve'et ha'olah. He will do the purification offering, the grain offering, the burnt offering, the shlamim, the offerings of well-being. You can look at all of Milgram's stuff on what these specific offerings are.
Is this
Okay.
propane?
Yep.
Question.
Yes.
Who is the prince of Israel in Israel?
Good question. Generally, I think we can assume that it's the king. He uses the term nasi, which is an old term. It goes back. When we talk about we call them sometimes chieftains, but the heads of the tribes in the wilderness are called nisi'im. So you can call them princes, you can call them rulers. Nasi today is the modern word for president. And we'll see a comment of Rashi, how he understands it. But Nasi probably just means the king.
But doesn't it just seems like it should be a high priest making expiation for Israel.
Some of
Well,
the Parshanim actually try to say that. Yeah. What the Nasi means is Kohen Gadol, but that's not shot. Okay, I can prove that to you without any ands ifs or buts. Next week's parsha, which is Parsha Vayikra, is going to discuss what happens if a Kohen makes a mistake, and then what happens if a Kohen Gadol makes a mistake, and then what happens if the Nasi makes a mistake. So they're clearly differentiating between the two. This is in chapter 4 of Vayikra. So you can look at it now, or you can wait till next Shabbat.
yeah.
Maybe
And we'll
Rabbi
see.
Papi would choose to talk about what he's doing out Torah, right?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about them in the past. And again, we'll see. Well, actually, look at, sorry, I have it in the Hebrew, the footnote, Rashi's commentary. Go on. Susie?
With the prince, I say that this Nasi is speaking about the Kohen Gadol, and similarly, every Nasi in this context. I heard this tradition in the name of Rabbi Menachem that it is speaking of the king.
So even when Rashi wants to explain this as the Kohen Gadol, he acknowledges, there's a tradition, this is just the king, and that is the pshat. Okay. Okay, thus said the sovereign Hashem. Go ahead, Susie.
Thus said the sovereign Hashem, on the first day of the first month you shall take a bull of the herd without blemish, and you shall cleanse the sanctuary. The priest shall take some of the blood of the purgation offering and apply it to the doorposts of the temple, to the four corners of the ledge of the altar, and to the doorposts of the gate of the inner court. You shall do the same on the seventh day of the month to purge the temple from impurity caused by unwitting or ignorant persons.
Okay, so here we have, we've got to do a cleansing of the Beit HaMikdash. And does this remind you of anything? I mean, we know that they, when they're cleansing the Beit HaMikdash, they put it, the blood and the horns of the altar, but also putting it on the doorposts of the temple and on the gate of the inner court.
Doorpost reminds me of
The
Karban Pesach,
Exodus.
Yeah, well, it reminds me of Korban Pesach, but also the placing the blood in different places.
because that's what they did at the time of the Karban Pesach. This is the month of the Karban
Right.
Pesach.
So
In
absolutely.
fact, the Parsha we're actually reading for the South Torah before it, it actually speaks about it. So you got that Hamashkol Stay Hamazuzot.
Right. But also
that's the math here.
Mhm. But also, exactly. So first of all, this is very clearly a reference or an allusion to Pesach, but also just this process of purgation, of cleansing, uh, of cleansing the temple. Also remember when it's purifying a human being, where do we put the blood? Ozen? Ayimanit?
Oh, you're talking about a Masorah. I didn't understand what you meant when you said a human being. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just saying that in general, the process of purification, just as we put it on different parts of the human being, on the ozen, on the ear, on the thumb, and the big toe, so too, we put it on different parts of or I should say that because we do this for the Beit HaMikdash, and we cleanse the different parts, so too for a human being, we put it on the different parts.
But
By
we
the way,
also anoint human beings that way. I'm not
right.
sure. So what's exactly the point that you're trying to make?
No, I'm just pointing out that these are processes of cleansing, not, and how we use blood as a way of cleansing. That's all. Nothing, I don't think there's anything deep there. Okay, wait one moment. I just want to bring up something else. Okay. Can you see this, by the way?
The one at the bottom?
No, the picture? No, let
No,
me
it's
start.
not on
I
the-
don't see any
No.
picture now.
Okay, wait one moment. All right. Now,
No.
visual aid.
Ah, there
Okay,
we are.
now we see it.
Yeah. So just a little bit of a sense. Now, of course, we have absolutely, first of all, this is Ezekiel's reconstructed temple. It's not necessarily what the temple looked like at the time of Solomon. In fact, we have no idea what the temple looked like at the time of Solomon. We also have no idea what it really looked like at the time of Herod and beyond when he rebuilt the temple. In fact, I distinctly remember some of you have been to the model of Second Temple Jerusalem in Jerusalem. It used to be located at the Holy Land Hotel. It's now located in the Israel Museum. It's really a remarkable model of what Jerusalem may have looked like at the time of the Second Temple. It's fascinating. I mean, it's huge. It's huge. And one of the realities of this model is they were constantly updating it based on archaeological finds.
Mhm.
And I remember my teacher, Lee Levine, great, wonderful guy and great teacher, and tremendously knowledgeable about temples and architecture and stuff. I mean, he used to walk into the model. I mean, you don't just walk into this model. He would walk into this model and he would be explaining, like, we originally built it this way, but then when we did the excavations, we saw that it was this way, so we changed that. And apparently, the model for the temple, which is certainly based on a lot of traditions and descriptions, was nonetheless actually taken from another Roman temple elsewhere in the empire, as kind of a basis, not
You're
total
talking about
copy,
Herod's temple.
but yeah, Herod's temple.
Okay, but
So,
remember
I
that
have
temple
to,
only lasted 70 years.
right.
Up to that point, the second temple didn't look like that at all.
No. So what I'm saying is that these are all reconstructions. We don't know what it looked like. And of course, this is part of Ezekiel's vision. But this is just to give you,
But again, let's make a point that Ezekiel's vision has no resemblance at all to the
right.
actual second temple that was put up in the time of Zerubbabel.
Yeah.
That's the real point, because those two are contemporary.
Yeah.
This
So,
really was the work of my teacher, Michael Aviona.
So what did he say?
well, he did a lot.
He did most of the original stuff.
No, what I meant was, Rabbi Zucker, how did he compare the actual second temple to Ezekiel's vision of the temple?
I don't know.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Because it's something you really have to not mislead yourself into thinking that what you're reading represents any structure that ever existed.
No, that's what I'm saying. This is, Ezekiel's vision.
It's
That was
the
not
vision only.
right. Okay. So, there's also something unusual here. On the first day of the first month, you shall take a bull, and you will cleanse the sanctuary. The first day of the first month, which is
Rosh
Nisan.
Chodesh Nisan.
Rosh Chodesh Nisan.
Haba Aleinu L'Tova.
Yeah. So, however, when we think of doing a cleansing of the Beit HaMikdash, when do we think of doing it?
Yom Kippur.
Right. Yom Kippur. So this is unusual right off the bat. There's nothing in the Torah about this particular cleansing of the shrine. And I should also say,
For that matter, Yechezkel doesn't even mention Yom Kippur.
exactly. One of the things, when they talk about, they may have wanted to suppress Yechezkel, is because there are a lot of things in Yechezkel that aren't in the Torah, and there are a lot of things in the Torah that aren't in Yechezkel. Even as Yechezkel very clearly draws on priestly traditions, and there are many points of contact. So, for example, even before our Haftarah, as it's talking about the different offerings that are brought, that you have to have righteous weights and measures, that's right out of Vayikra. But, here, the things that Yechezkel is talking about, we don't find in the Torah. And what it's pointing to is the fact that there were different priestly traditions that were floating around. I mean, Milgram and other scholars constantly, Levine, my teacher, Baruch,
Baruch Levine.
Halpern?
no, not Baruch Levine.
Baruch Halpern?
No.
Okay, let's keep going.
Schwartz.
Who?
Is it Baruch Schwartz?
Schwartz, that's it.
Yeah, Baruch Schwartz. Yeah, I knew him as Barney. But anyway, no, I also knew him as Baruch. They've all written about the different types of all right, what was I just lost my train of thought. Senior moment.
You're trying to reconcile the fact that
Yeah, that there are different, but
and
the idea that there are different priestly traditions, they see the contradictions within Sefer Vayikra and between Sefer Vayikra and Bamidbar. So it should not be a surprise, just in general in studying Tanakh, that there are multiple traditions that go into the final product. Whether they're stories, like the stories of the flood, they're stories of Abraham, the Sarah, but also the ritual laws. We've spoken in the past that we're coming up to Pesach. It's very clear how do we eat the Pesach offering? How's it supposed to be prepared?
Burnt.
Pardon me?
Burnt.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Burnt.
Burnt. But how? How do you cook it?
Roasted.
Roasted. Right. Except in Deuteronomy, it says you can boil it too. So, there were clearly different traditions. And we sometimes see, and here I think it's very clear that Yechezkel may represent, well, very definitely represents different traditions than those that were finally canonized within the Torah. And by the way, it could very well be that Yechezkel himself is a bit of an outlier and that the other traditions were far more prevalent or understood within priestly circles. And, Yechezkel was an unusual guy. So that doesn't mean that he wasn't, he was part of the establishment. He was among the first exiles.
he was part of the establishment in exile. How much of that, got to Eretz Israel is a big, big question mark.
Yeah.
Okay. In fact, I'm not even sure that after the Khurban, he is that as much part of the establishment as he was before it. Before the Khurban, he has at least once a year an assembly where there's a Canim and other reps, come to hear what he has to say. But after the Khurban, that seems to stop altogether. And if anything, he's concerned about the fact that they don't seem to be even listening to him. I guess the issue was, we've been exiled. What's going to happen to the Jewish community left in Eretz Yisrael, as well as what's going to happen to the Beit HaMikdash? When the rest of the Jewish community was exiled and the Beit HaMikdash was destroyed, what was there to ask Yechezkel about?
Yeah, he's an expert on what's no longer there.
Well, it was just like, there was, people at that point must have been totally wiped out. Just think about the reaction of rabbis in America of all denominations that the Jews of Europe have been wiped out, pretty much, most, pulpit rabbis were aware of the fact that was happening at least by 1944. After the war, what were they going to do about it? In other words, they tried. Stephen Wise tried, but they didn't succeed. And after the war, not too many people were interested anymore in whatever they had to say because it's clear that what they did try to do didn't succeed. So Yechezkel now is reduced to going around saying words of comfort, but not backing them up with any kind of action of it on anybody's part, So I don't know. My professor at Bernard Revel, Professor Holtz, once said that a lot of these prophets end up, the last thing you hear of them is they're going into the sunset as embittered men because basically nobody has really picked up on their message. And he mentioned specifically Yirmiyahu and Yechezkel.
Well, they were prophets that lived at very, very difficult times.
Yes.
Very, very difficult times. And, there is a tremendous amount of bitterness. And I have to say, when my colleagues and I in rabbinical school, when we were looking at, Malachi and, it was like, oh my God, this poor guy, he has to make the same kvetches against the people what happened before the destruction? Like, oh my God, why have things not changed? So anyway, going on. So here we're going to see a little bit of the issue of, there's some differences between what we have in the Torah and what we have in our Haftarah. Would somebody like to go on? Thus said, this is from the Talmud, Tractate Menachot. Thus said, volunteer to read?
I'll read, Rabbi.
Okay, thank you, Ricky.
Thus said the sovereign Hashem, on the first day of the first month, you shall take a bull of the herd without blemish, and you shall cleanse the sanctuary. You
I'm
shall
not going to ask the question. Go ahead.
You shall cleanse
Hiteta.
Hiteta.
Yeah, the word, when we think of chatat, we often think of chet, sin. But in the PL form, a different conjugation, it means to cleanse. Hence, Milgram's emphasis on the fact that it should not be called a sin offering, but a purification offering, or as they call it here, a purgation offering. And it says very clearly, "V'chiteta et hamikdash," you shall purify, you shall purge, you shall cleanse the sanctuary. But do I have it in the
I think this is an olam. I'm having a difficult time understanding what the Hebrew there says.
Yeah, but also just take a look at Rashi here.
The use
Ricky?
with the use,
Right, yes.
the use of the word
Oh,
Hiteta
I see why. Okay.
implies that this offering of a bull is a chatat, purification offering. However, in Numbers, it indicates that on Rosh Chodesh, the bull is an olah offering.
Yeah, and olah
is an olah offering.
Allah is just, totally burned on the altar. So, like, wait a
There
minute
is a
here.
chatat in Rosh Chodesh, but it's a goat.
Right, exactly. So they acknowledge, yeah, this is a problem. Here's it's a burnt offering. Look at, and those of us who've read on Rosh Chodesh, we know this very well. So Rabbi Yochanan, it gives an interpretation.
Rabbi Yochanan says this passage is in the future. Eliyahu will interpret it.
Yeah.
Rashi. In the future, Eliyahu will interpret it. Until Eliyahu comes and explains it to us, we do not know how to explain it.
Yeah. So every once in a while, Rashi says,
he's not saying you do this every Rosh Chodesh. He's saying you only do it on the Rosh Chodesh of Nisan.
Right.
So the contradiction isn't really as bad as he would said. You do this on Rosh Chodesh all the time. He clearly isn't saying that. He's making Rosh Chodesh a little different, Rosh Chodesh Nisan, than the others. Well, after all, we do that with Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, don't we?
Yeah. But the point is that it's unusual and it requires some explanation. It should be said that
it puts much more emphasis on Nisan than on Tishrei, whereas the Torah definitely puts much more emphasis on the Tishrei holidays than the Nisan holiday. So there's clearly a disconnect there.
Mm-hmm. Also, it should, Rabbi Zucker just mentioned teku, which is a phrase in the Talmud, which literally is a shortened form of tekum, let it stand. When you can't resolve a difference, you let it stand. In modern Hebrew, actually, the word teku is used for draw in chess.
And for a tie in a sports game.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's Roshei Tevot.
Right.
Kushiyot uvayot.
Right.
But that Roshei Tevot, many people think, was appended long afterwards because of the fact that nobody really had any idea what teku meant.
Right.
That was really what it did mean. I think what Rabbi Papi said at the beginning is more likely to what it was originally meant.
Yeah, except that
Tevot are fun. Elul, Iwa Dodi Vidodi Li. Well, that's great, but it's not. No one's going to tell you but that's what it meant originally. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's clearly not an original interpretation. However, that becomes one of the ways that, we understand the word teku. We also know that it stands for in Aramaic tekum, but nonetheless, they created this wonderful little interpretation, though, that it's the Rashei Tevot, because so many things get added on to Eliyahu in terms of what his role will be
You
in the
said added
future.
on, I would say dumped.
Pardon me?
You're saying added on to Elio. I would say dumped on Elio.
No, well, that's what added on to Eliyahu.
Yeah.
All of the things. I mean, maybe we'll be able to ask him.
He's gonna be an
If he
awfully
comes to
busy
our
guy.
Seder this year, we can ask him.
By the time he comes, he's a little bit shook.
Yeah, that's true if he drinks all the wine. But then again, you're talking about a guy that, he goes up to heaven in a fiery chariot. He's a fiery guy. I don't know if the wine really touches him. There's
lots of Elios. You choose the one you want.
Did I
Yeah.
tell you what my grandson did a couple of years ago?
No, tell us.
He had everything hidden away, a long wig and robes and everything, and he excused himself from the table. And when we got to opening the door for Eliyahu, he was outside, and the little boys opened the door and freaked out.
That's very cute.
Very clever.
I like it.
Yeah, unfortunately, when we'd often
Surprise!
we would get to the opening the door for Eliyahu, and it would be my cousin Alfred who would come in to see what we had to eat. He was at his aunt and uncle's Seder around the corner, and then he would come in. He was definitely not Eliyahu. May Al rest in peace. He was a remarkable guy. Unusual, but really good family man. Okay, let's go back to our Haftarah.
On the 14th day of the first month, you shall have the Passover sacrifice. And during a festival of 7 days, unleavened bread shall be eaten. On that day, the prince shall provide a bull of purgation offering on behalf of himself and of the entire population.
What's that?
And during the 7 days of the festival, he shall provide daily for 7 days 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish for a burnt offering to Hashem, and 1 goat daily for a purgation offering. He shall provide a grain offering of an ephah for each bull, and an ephah for each ram, and a hin of oil to every ephah. So too, during the festival of the 7th month, for 7 days from the 15th day on, he shall provide the same purgation offerings, burnt offerings, and grain offerings, and oil.
Yeah. So, here, first of all, in many ways, it's very much like the Torah in the sense that the 14th day of the month is the Pesach, and then you have 7 days of Matzot. All kinds of theories about, how Pesach became a holiday that originally was 2 separate holidays, that of Pesach and that of the Matzot, because Pesach really means the Pesach offering.
But there are some strange things in verse 21. It doesn't say Shivat Yomim. It says Shavuot Yomim.
Right.
Somebody's trying to play around here with the fact that somewhere along the line this is a procession preceding for Chag HaShavuot, and then though he doesn't mention that for favors,
Right.
And then later on, when you hear the word Chag in the description of Sukkot, Bech Chag, well, we tend to think that means the Chag the way it is in Sefer Malachim, but he's already talking about Pesach HaShivat Yemei HaChag, which is not the way Sefer Malachim would talk about
Right.
that.
Mm-hmm.
So look, it's what you said before is right on, Rabbi Papi. We're just dealing here with someone who has, a different idea of the way things should be done, and that's pretty. And you're just having a chance to read it.
Mm-hmm. And what's kind of interesting, for as much as they saw the difference between Yechezkel and the Torah, they nonetheless chose this passage as the maftir, as the
I wondered
haftarah.
about that too. Basically, it seemed a little odd, but I think why they did it is because when push comes to shove, what you're reading about it in the Maftir is the Karban Pesach,
Mhm.
and there are other places in the Tanakh where Karban Pesach is definitely mentioned. I don't
Yeah.
like using the word Karban Pesach. It's never called the Karban except the Pesach Sheni. So let's just call it the Pesach, okay? So the Pesach was, but the details of the Pesach are never discussed anywhere except in our Parshat HaChodesh.
Mhm.
So maybe what they wanted was a text that discusses the details,
Yeah. But obviously they weren't
Even if they are.
disturbed. They weren't too disturbed. Well, the
You know,
fact.
I always say the Haftarah is not meant to complement the reading in the sense of to give it again. It's more meant to give you. Look at next week's Haftarah. Next week's Haftarah is going to talk about we don't want Karbanot, even though the whole part is about Karbanot.
Right.
The Haftarah of Parshat Tzav, I'm not talking about Shabbat. Tzav is take your olot and your zvachim and then pile them up and forget about it. In other words, a good number of times we pointed out Torah is to contradict what you see in the Torah reading and not to basically simply supplement it. So it may very well be that, that was something that they wanted to put up front too.
Also, this whole attitude toward Yechezkel, they also said you should never use the first chapter of Yechezkel for a haftarah.
And there's a Gemara that says that they wanted to be Gonei Sefer Yechezkel altogether.
Yeah. So, but we read the first chapter of Yechezkel.
Right,
We have to wait a little while. That's on the first day of
people
Shavuot.
don't always
right.
follow what the Gemara tells them. Plenty of times we've proceeded to go ahead and do things that we want, despite what the Gemara describes. And then you have Tosafot and all kinds of other, halakhic authorities wondering how the hell that happens. But as a practical, I know perfectly well that it happens. I mean, does our Seder resemble in any way, except maybe, a couple of superficial matters, the Mishnah Seder? I mean, the Seder in Eretz Israel is totally different from the Seder that we have. So I don't have any problem with this. And I think we tend to think that the rabbis were less tolerant of contradiction than they really were. Okay? If Pirkei Avot was prepared to quote the super apikoros Elisha ben Avuya, and the Tanakh itself was prepared to include books like Kohelet and Eov, which are certainly arguing against the mainstream doctrines of the Tanakh. And then Shir Shirim, which is essentially, love songs. Okay, they come up with a cover story for these things. Doesn't change the fact that the editors who put them in were not that upset. And I think we should realize how broad the Jewish tradition is. It's a big tent. It's got a lot of room, and basically that's the way we should approach it.
Yeah. No, it's very clear. The last thing the rabbis our tradition is intolerant of different opinions and different perspectives. And in fact, my teacher, Shaya Cohen, argued, I don't know if I totally agree with him, but
this is Shaya Cohen?
Yeah, Shaya Cohen.
Okay. A lot of Cohen's rather.
Yeah, I think it was Shaya Cohen, or it could also have been Yeshayahu Gafni, but I'm pretty sure it was Cohen, who said that, when you take a look at the Mishnah, which is produced in the wake of the destruction of the Second Temple and the failure of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. They gathered all of the traditions so they wouldn't be lost. And yet, the Mishnah is just full of different opinions.
A good deal of it precedes the destruction of the temple.
Yeah.
Beit Hillel precedes the destruction.
Right. However, it becomes canonized with the Mishnah and the Tosefta and in the Gemara. The Gemara rarely comes to a decision, and the Gemara, even the rabbis' commentaries on the Mishnah that make up the Gemara, the discussions on the Mishnah, as modern scholars have been arguing, were very often artificially constructed. When you have two rabbis from different generations arguing, well, they probably weren't arguing. That
When
argument
I
was
was
put
studying at
together.
the Jewish Theological Seminary, Professor Nachman David, who was the professor of Gaonic literature, would say that if you come across something in the Bible that says the Hilchata, it was like so and so, that's not original. That was added by the Gaonim afterwards.
So
that even proves more, what you just said, Rabbi Papi.
yeah, so there's really a lot of openness. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean that we don't try and deal with some of these contradictions or differences. Here's Rashi again on this description of the 7 bulls and 7 rams without blemish. Would somebody like to continue? I'd like to give different people a chance to read.
I'll read.
Okay, thank you, Carol.
But the Torah states, Numbers 28:19, 2 young bulls, 1 ram. We can explain this verse only as meaning 7 bulls and 7 rams for the 7 days, a bull daily and a ram daily. And it comes to teach us that the bulls do not render each other invalid and the rams do not render each other invalid. That is, if one bull is not bringing proof from this
If
verse,
one bull is missing,
oh, it's missing, sorry. The other one may be brought. So we learned in Menachot 45a, however, they did not bring proof from this verse, but from the verse below, 46:6, but on the new moon, a young bull from those without blemish, and 6 lambs and a ram.
yeah, so they said that, they didn't use this verse, because it seems to contradict what's in the Torah. The rabbis didn't use this verse, they used a different verse. Go on.
But perhaps this too comes to teach the same thing, and this is its meaning: 7 bulls and 7 rams daily. By adding the sacrifices of each day, they add up to 7 bulls for the 7 days.
Yeah, so Rashi's going a little bit, different ways to try and reconcile this, which, doesn't totally work. And now we have a Barbanel statement.
Since all 7 days of the holiday of Pesach would be included in the days of inauguration, the Torah says, and during the 7 days of the festival, he shall provide daily for 7 days 7 bulls. But this is completely from the inauguration offerings on those days, except for the Pesach edition that is written in the Torah.
In other words, there's also a time of the inauguration of the priests and their sacrifices or offerings brought on those days. So Barbanel is trying to explain that, well, these are these offerings and these are those,
It's a one-time deal. Yechezkel's not prescribing a law for all time. He's prescribing the first time the temple is reconstructed. We'll have the limb ceremony similar to the one way back when with the Mishkan, and at that ceremony they did have 7 A.
Right. Mm-hmm. And
so now that happens to be a very ingenious solution to the problem.
That's a very good, because then
it doesn't mean it's strat though.
No, but I don't think it is, but it's clever. And he, of course, goes on to give some more reasons why this is so.
This is not an innovation in the sacrifices of the Torah for the coming future, as thought Rabbi David Kimchi, because of the doubts that I mentioned in the questions.
That's at the beginning of all of his commentaries. Barbanel begins with a number of questions. Sometimes the best part of his commentary is to read what are the questions he raises.
Rather, it is from the matter of the inauguration offerings, because they alone are the sacrifices of the sacred occasions of which the Torah commanded us.
Okay, so he's saying, this is just as
or Radak happens to say, whether we like it or not, things are going to be different than the sacrificial.
Right.
So Barbanel isn't too happy with that,
Yeah.
So that's what's causing that little rub,
Okay, let's finish up the, well, we're not going to finish up the Haftarah, but one other section.
But you've done a magnificent job of at least tackling it, Rabbi Pop.
Yeah, but also there's
Easy.
probably the least exciting section of the Haftarah. We should just look at one thing here. Keep going, Carol. Thus said.
Thus said the sovereign Hashem, the gate of the inner court that faces east shall be closed on the 6 working days. It shall be open on the Sabbath day, and it shall be open on the day of the new moon. The prince shall enter by way of the vestibule outside the gate, and shall, excuse me, attend at the gatepost, while the priest sacrifice his burnt offering and his offering of well-being. He shall then bow low at the threshold of the gate and depart.
By the way, that should point out what we were talking before about the Nasi. We're talking about the king, and indeed, it's the Kohanim who do the sacrifice. He comes to the entrance, gives them his sacrifice, they do it, and then he bows and goes.
The gate, however, shall not be closed until evening. The common people shall worship before Hashem on Sabbaths and new moons at the entrance of the same gate.
Okay, so there's something special about the gates. First of all, one reason I brought in the section about the East Gate before is that who comes in the East Gate? Who did we see at the very beginning? Who comes in the East Gate?
Eliyahu?
Oh,
No. Hashem. Remember when he taught in
Yes.
Ezekiel's initial vision?
Hashem comes once to just get the
Right, he just comes once, but the East is always the favorite spot. We just know this. Now, just to understand this whole idea of coming entrances and exits are very, very, very important in religion in general, in a lot of things, by the way, in society in general. So here is just in looking, the importance of entrance and exits. First of all, this is an AI overview from Google. Go ahead, entering.
Entering and leaving a sacred space often involves specific rituals and etiquette to show respect, such as removing shoes, covering your head, or bowing, depending on the tradition and location. It's a time for reflection and transition from the ordinary to the sacred.
Yeah, and that's
Also,
why.
the Mashiach is supposed to come in through the East Gate,
Oh, right.
and that's why the Muslims closed up the Golden Gate, which is the East Gate, so that the
but at the
Jewish
moment the
Mashiach should not be
was
able to
sitting
come
at-
in.
But right now the Mashiach was sitting at the gates of Rome, says the Bible.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a whole
There's
another thing.
contradictions.
Let's just keep going here. I want to just on this topic of making transitions from sacred space to from profane space to sacred space. And by the way, we do that even in our homes, or some people do. Some people have the custom of kissing the mezuzah. You don't just walk in. You kiss the mezuzah, and so there are all kinds of rituals. It's not just Christians that have holy water, Muslims that take off their shoes. We've got our own thing. So just a little bit more on religious places. So this is from an article. I'm not saying that this is like the last word in the subject or even the first word in the subject, just something to keep our mind on it. Go ahead, Carol.
Anthropologists distinguish between space, an unmarked physical field on which imagination or action can occur, and place, a location that has sociocultural meanings attached. Many religions and religious practices are defined by sacred places that serve as settings for hierophany.
That means an appearance of a god.
Okay. The manifestation of the sacred or divine. Commonly, the sense of the sacred derives from the prior history and the use of a place. In most religions, sacred places are marked by other symbols. A Jewish home is identified as a special religious place. One way of marking the sacred place is by attaching mezuzahs, small casings containing a tiny parchment with a verse from the Torah to external and internal doorposts. Placing these mezuzot at the points of entry mark the place inside as holy, sacred, and set apart. Like most religious places, the Jewish home is a densely symbolic place.
Remember, it's also called a mikdash ma'at, a small sanctuary. So, that we all understand that. Go on.
Religious places are part of the built environment or places that people create as representations of their beliefs. Religious scholar Mircea Eliade focuses on religious places in his work, The Sacred and the Profane, arguing that one becomes aware of the sacred because it manifests itself, shows itself, totally different from the profane. He identifies three characteristics associated with sacred places.
And this is, keep going.
Every sacred place is marked by a threshold which separates the two spaces, the sacred inside and the profane outside. It marks a passageway and a new mode of being. The threshold is the limit, the boundary, the frontier. It is guarded in various ways, and it is an object of great importance. Every sacred place
Memorializes
a hierophany or sacred event by including an area within the sacred space that is most holy, usually where something sacred has occurred in the past. This is like an umbilical cord. Eliade calls it an access mundi that connects practitioner with deity and our spirit, memorializing the occurrence of something special that happened or happens here. In many religious places, there will be an altar or some sort of commemoration in this spot.
Yeah, we can think of the Beit HaMikdash. That is Even Shtiyah, the foundation stone. That was where Avraham almost sacrificed Yitzchak, and then in later Christian tradition and Muslim tradition, they also connect it. And you can see this in many.
Are you implying that what you're reading in the Machzor, that the ordinary homes of Israelites are going to have blood put on their mezuzot and on the lintels, and then they're not to go out of the house, that's designating ordinary homes as some kind of sacred space? Because that's where I thought you were going. I'm not.
Well, yes, no, absolutely. And we think of it. I was thinking of that. I'm sorry I didn't bring it out, but certainly very clear.
That's me.
Can somebody turn off mute their phone? Thank you. I want to finish
Sorry,
here.
Philip. I hope everybody probably went.
Yeah. So
wait, let me see.
Yeah. So again, I think what happens at a Pesach Seder is a sacred event. And even Pesach Mitzrayim, of course, they had to protect themselves. The blood on the doorpost was a prophylactic. It was a protection against the Malach HaMavet, the angel of death, or God passing through. But it is marking something special. You eat the Pesach offering together in the place, and you don't go out. And even to some extent, what do? We open the door for Eliyahu. We allow him into the sacred place. I mean, there's much more here. I just wanted to kind of throw this out as, when we think of all this difference about what gate you go in, what gate you go out, there's something about religious space or a difference between sacred and profane space. And then Carol just finished with this last one, every sacred place.
Every sacred place represents an imago mundi, an image or microcosm of the world as seen from the religious perspective. In some religious traditions, sacred places will be decorated with reminders of what is most valued by that tradition, using various types of artworks. In Catholic churches, for example, paintings of the events associated with the crucifixion of JC, known as the Stations of the Cross, remind believers of JC's sacrifice.
Yeah, you can say the word Christ. It just means Messiah, and we don't believe he's the Messiah. No. So that religious spaces, and that could be a specific holy site like a church, a synagogue, a mosque, a temple, whatever. Can be marked in certain ways, but even in smaller ways. We mark off our homes. And I mean, it's not the same, but one could even say that we mark off our homes on Shabbat with an eruv. I mean, we don't really mark off our homes, but we can, in earlier times, we marked off courtyards. We created a larger space. So, and you'll read the rest of the Haftarah. There's a lot more. I'm sorry, but a lot of interesting stuff. Not the most exciting Haftarah we read during the year, but it actually has got all kinds of fascinating elements to it, and was quite controversial in some ways. But in other words, yeah, okay, it's different. So, I want to wish everyone a Shabbat Shalom. Have a
Mvorach.
great
You
day.
too.
Asher kochocha.
Thank
Bruchim to
you.
you. Take
Thank
care.
you.
Thanks,
See you
everybody.
Sunday.
Thank you.
Yes, I'll see you on Sunday.
Shabbat
care.
shalom.
Shabbat
On
Shalom.
Sunday.
Shabbat shalom.
No, we've got it baked in.
Oh, okay.
Okay, take care.